What if I told you that the greatest engineers of the American forests never once held a metal tool in their hands? Are you ready to learn the truth about how the Native Americans of the Northeast survived deadly forest storms? Imagine yourself in a remote forest as the sky darkens and a merciless, icy downpour begins, one that would kill any unprepared traveler. In such a critical situation, a lone traveler simply had no room for panic or the slightest mistake. He had to build an impenetrable shelter literally out of nothing in a matter of minutes before the storm hit. And they knew one incredible secret of survival, which modern science still considers a brilliant engineering solution. The indigenous people of this wild frontier never tried to fight the elements head-on. They learned from nature itself. To escape certain hypothermia, the Native American drew on his people's centuries-old experience and the ancient wisdom of his ancestors. Hunters closely observed river beavers and skillfully replicated the principles behind the construction of their perfect homes. These survival experts laid wide strips of tree bark in a specific way, creating an ancient counterpart to modern waterproof roofing tiles. Rainwater simply rolled off these natural shields, leaving the interior completely protected from the raging elements. Inside such a hut, one could not only sleep peacefully, but also build a safe, warming fire. Modern tourists with expensive gear often freeze in places where indigenous people felt completely safe. Watch this video to the end, and you'll learn the tribe's hidden techniques for turning ordinary branches into an impregnable, dry fortress. We'll show you in detail a forgotten construction method that could one day save your life in extreme wilderness conditions. What we found in old archives completely changes our understanding of life in the forest. The eastern forests of North America have always been characterized by dense vegetation and sudden changes in weather. A hunter from the Iroquois tribe often ventured far from the settlement in search of necessary materials. His path led through overgrown ravines, wide streams, and impassable thickets. The autumn sky in these parts was regularly covered by heavy clouds without warning. The first raindrops fell on dry leaves with a characteristic loud thud. The air instantly filled with a thick scent of damp earth and old wood. The hunter realized that it would take days of continuous travel to reach the nearest longhouse. Continuing through the dense forest in the pouring rain meant he would quickly freeze. He needed to find a suitable spot immediately to build a temporary shelter. Choosing the right spot was the most important step in building a reliable shelter. The hunter looked for a small elevation so that the water wouldn't flood the ground. The ideal spot was near a large fallen tree or a sturdy stump. Such a natural barrier served as a reliable foundation for the future shelter. There had to be a sufficient amount of building material in the form of branches nearby. The trunk of an old oak tree, toppled by a strong wind, served as a ready-made wall. The mighty roots, torn from the ground, provided additional protection from the biting wind. The hunter carefully inspected the trunk for unstable or rotten sections. He checked the strength of the bark, removing excess debris from branches on the chosen side. The ground near such a tree often remained dry, even after a downpour began. Construction began with preparing the site for the future wooden shelter. The hunter quickly cleared the ground of sharp stones, large pine cones, and branches. He raked dry leaves into a separate pile to create a soft bedding. A level surface ensured a comfortable rest and prevented moisture from accumulating inside. Every movement was measured and precise, saving precious minutes before the storm. The foundation of the Beaver Lodge method was the creation of a dense dome from interwoven branches. The hunter gathered thick, long poles, laying them at an angle to the trunk. The lower ends of the poles rested firmly on the ground, forming a sturdy frame. The distance between the poles was about the width of a palm to allow for tight packing of the subsequent layers. This design distributed the weight evenly and withstood strong gusts of wind. Branches from flexible species, such as young maple, were used to create the frame. They bent easily without breaking at all and allowed the hunter to form the desired slope. The hunter wove thin crossbars between the poles, creating a sturdy mesh. This mesh served as the foundation for holding the main protective layer of leaves. The frame quickly took the shape of a hemisphere, leaning against a large log. The work proceeded in complete silence, broken only by the rustling of dry leaves. The hunter was fully focused on the process, forgetting his fatigue and the evening chill. He knew that the strength of his temporary shelter depended on the precision with which the parts were fitted together. His hands weaved the twigs with practiced ease, forming a reliable shield against the approaching storm. Darkness gradually descended upon the forest, urging the lone forest builder to hurry. When the frame was ready, it was time to create a waterproof layer of vegetation. The hunter used wide strips of bark stripped from long fallen trees. The bark was laid like scales, starting from the bottom and moving upward toward the top. The upper layers overlapped the lower ones, causing water droplets to roll down the outer surface. This principle mimicked the construction of roofs on large, long Native American houses. On top of the bark, the hunter laid a thick layer of dry leaves and fir branches. This layer served as excellent insulation and additional protection against seeping moisture. The downpour had already begun to beat down on the tops of the tall trees with full force. The hunter managed to take shelter inside his structure, leaving only a small opening. We'd love to hear your thoughts on these skills. Please share them in the comments and be sure to subscribe to our channel. I'll reveal the best-kept secret of properly organizing the interior of a hunting shelter. Inside the shelter, twilight reigned, with only faint evening light filtering through. First, the hunter began to set up a dry and warm place to sleep. He spread the dry leaves he had gathered earlier in a thick layer across the entire earthen floor. Soft spruce branches were laid on top, creating something like a springy forest mattress. The hunter took flint and dry tinder from his travel bag. Starting a fire inside such a small shelter required special care and skill. He chose a spot closer to the entrance so that the smoke could easily escape outside. A small depression in the ground served as a hearth to sustain the tiny flame. The tinder ignited instantly from the spark, illuminating the interior of the forest shelter. The flame was tiny, but it provided the necessary warmth and comfort. The hunter added thin, dry twigs, trying not to create too much smoke. Warm air rose upward, heating the dome and drying the damp patches of bark. The smell of burning wood mingled with the scent of fir needles and wet earth. This microclimate helped the hunter relax after a difficult and strenuous trek. The light from the fire reflected off the smooth inner surface of the bark, creating whimsical shadows. The hunter carefully inspected the arches of his shelter, checking for leaks. If water seeped in anywhere, he quickly plugged the gap with moss or a tuft of grass. The structure required minimal maintenance thanks to the skillfully laid outer layer of bark. Water flowed smoothly down the edges of the shelter, forming small puddles outside. Under the protection of a reliable dome, the hunter could finally change into dry clothes. He took off his wet moccasins and hung them to dry next to the warm hearth. Keeping his feet warm was the key to surviving in the forest. The heat from the fire gradually penetrated every cell of his weary body. A sense of security replaced the initial anxiety he had felt at the approaching forest downpour. In his pack was a small supply of food consisting of dried meat. The hunter chewed his food slowly, enjoying the silence and warmth of his temporary shelter. Pemmican provided his body with the energy needed to recover after a long walk. His water supply was in a flask made from a dried gourd, tightly sealed with a wooden stopper. The meal took place in a peaceful atmosphere, accompanied by the monotonous sound of heavy rain. Outside the walls of the shelter, nature continued to test the forest's strength with powerful gusts. Thick tree branches creaked and cracked under the pressure of the relentless strong wind. But inside the beaver lodge, the hunter felt as if he were in a real stone fortress. The geometry of the dome allowed the wind to smoothly curve around the obstacle without creating excessive pressure. The wisdom of his ancestors had once again proven its incredible effectiveness in the harshest conditions. The fire gradually turned into a pile of smoldering red coals, giving off a steady heat. The hunter settled more comfortably on his bed, wrapped in a warm camping cloak. The sound of the rain merged into a single lullaby, lulling the man into a deep sleep. The shelter withstood the first onslaught of the storm, thanks to its unique, multi-layered structure. But how exactly did the ancient craftsmen select the forest materials so that water would literally bounce off the roof? What if I showed you a time machine that transports you to the era of ancient technologies? The selection of materials for a forest shelter was a true science, honed over centuries. The Iroquois knew the properties of every tree growing in their native forests perfectly well. Birch bark was considered the most valuable material due to its flexibility and waterproofness. It did not let moisture through even under heavy pressure and prolonged exposure to rain. Hunters stripped the birch bark in large rectangular pieces using a sharp bone tool. This process required precision to avoid damaging the inner part of the tree trunk. The harvested bark was rolled into rolls and could be stored for a long time without losing its properties. In the event of a sudden downpour, birch bark became the ideal top layer for a shelter. Water droplets instantly rolled off its smooth surface, not lingering for a second. The bark of elm and ash trees was also widely used to cover forest shelters. It was stiffer but held its shape well and did not warp over time. Hunters laid these bark sheets overlapping, creating a dense, multi-layered protective shell. The inner layers remained dry thanks to the correct angle of the entire structure. Each bark sheet was carefully selected for size to ensure a perfect fit. Thick, green forest moss was used to fill small cracks and joints. The moss had a unique ability to absorb moisture, swelling and sealing any openings. The hunter packed it tightly between the branches of the frame and pieces of tough bark. This sealant not only kept water out, but also prevented drafts. The moss retained its elasticity even with significant fluctuations in nighttime temperatures. Leaves from broadleaf trees, such as oak or maple, formed the lower layers. Dry foliage effectively blocked airflow, acting as a natural insulator. The hunter raked up the leaves in large armfuls, filling the gaps between the supporting poles of the frame. The thicker this layer was, the warmer it became inside the forest beaver lodge. The leaves also created a soft, cushioning layer that protected against impacts from branches. Clay and mud were used extremely rarely, only when other materials were unavailable. During heavy rain, soggy clay could seep through and ruin the interior comfort. Therefore, preference was always given to dry plant materials with good water repellency. The hunter carefully cleaned the bark of any remaining soil before laying it on the roof. The cleanliness of the materials ensured the durability and reliability of the temporary forest dwelling. Knowledge of the properties of materials was passed down from the older generation to the younger through practice. Every young hunter had to be able to distinguish tree species almost in complete darkness. He knew which wood burned without smoke and which bent best under load. This knowledge was the key to survival in the harsh conditions of the wild North American wilderness. The forest provided everything necessary. One only needed to know how to use it properly. A smart choice of materials allowed a shelter to be built in just a few dozen minutes. Nature itself suggested the best engineering solutions through observation of the surroundings. Beaver lodges served as the perfect example of creating sturdy and warm structures from branches. The hunter simply adapted this principle to his own needs and available resources. If you like this story about ancient technologies, please like this video. The hidden truth that everyone keeps quiet about lies in the unique geometry of the forest frame. Building the foundation required a clear understanding of how physical load is distributed under challenging conditions. The hunter began by setting up the 3 thickest and strongest poles as supports. They were tied together at the top, forming a stable pyramid leaning against a fallen log. This tripod bore the main weight of the future multi-layered roof. The support poles were dug several centimeters into the ground for greater stability. The hunter used a pointed wooden stick to quickly make holes in the soft soil. The soil around the posts was firmly packed down with the feet, securing the poles in a strictly vertical position. This prevented the structure from shifting during strong side gusts of storm winds. A sturdy foundation was an absolute guarantee of safety for the person sleeping inside. Additional branches were added to the main support poles, forming a ribbed frame. They were spaced at equal intervals, creating a dense wooden lattice. The distance between the ribs was calculated to prevent the protective layer of bark from sagging. The hunter carefully tested each branch for strength by leaning his full weight against it. Fragile or rotten twigs were immediately cast aside without a second thought. The cross-weaving gave the frame incredible rigidity and spatial stability of form. Thin, flexible willow or hazel twigs were interwoven between the vertical ribs in a checkerboard pattern. This created the likeness of a sturdy basket, turned upside down over the sleeping area. The weaving began at the very ground and gradually rose to the top of the tree canopy. The frame became a single, unified whole, capable of withstanding the weight of heavy, wet snow or heavy rain. The entrance to the shelter was always located on the side opposite the wind. This prevented slanting raindrops and icy nighttime drafts from getting inside. The opening was made small, just large enough for a person to crawl inside on all fours. A small, projecting canopy made of thick fir branches was constructed above the entrance. It served as an additional barrier, diverting streams of pouring water away from the passageway. The height of the shelter was determined by the height of a seated person, with a little extra room for comfort. There was no point in building a tall shelter, as it would be harder to heat. The low ceiling allowed for the efficient use of heat from a tiny indoor fire. Warm air accumulated under the ceiling, gradually heating the entire space around the hunter. Saving energy and materials was the top priority when setting up a temporary camp. The final step in working on the frame was smoothing out all sharp corners and protruding branches. The hunter broke off any protruding branches inside the shelter so he wouldn't accidentally catch on them in complete darkness. The smooth inner surface also prevented damage to clothing or leather camping gear. The outer branches were left intentionally so that heavy layers of bark and leaves would cling to them. The frame blended completely with the surrounding forest landscape, becoming a natural part of it. Building such a sturdy wooden framework required extraordinary physical endurance. The hunter expended a great deal of energy gathering and fitting heavy support poles in the pouring rain. But these efforts were more than rewarded by a sense of complete safety during a forest storm. The basic structure was ready to withstand the blows of the wind and the torrents of pouring rain. But how did they cope with this terrible weather without modern insulation? The insulation system in the Beaver Lodge was a complex, multi-layered pie of plant material. The first layer, adjacent to the wooden frame, consisted of a thick carpet of dry oak leaves. The leaves created an air gap that effectively prevented accumulated heat from escaping. This simple principle resembled modern porous insulation, which is widely used in construction. The hunter packed the leaves tightly so that the wind would not blow warm air out through the cracks. A thick layer of long forest grass or dry ferns was laid on top of the leaves. The grass securely bound the leaves together, preventing them from scattering in gusts of squall-force wind. It also served as an additional barrier against the tiniest water droplets penetrating through the thick bark. The fern stems possessed excellent water-repellent properties thanks to their unique, smooth surface. This layer was neatly distributed across the entire surface of the plant dome in an even, dense layer. The third layer consisted of layers of stiff bark arranged in a fish scale pattern. The bark served as the main outer shield, deflecting the direct impact of heavy autumn raindrops. The edges of each piece overlapped one another, directing water flows strictly downward toward the ground. The absence of large gaps ensured that the interior of the shelter remained completely dry. Moisture ran down the smooth plates, finding absolutely no way into the warm refuge. The finishing touch was covering the roof with heavy spruce branches. The spruce branches pressed the bark securely against the frame, preventing strong winds from tearing off the light layers. The thick green needles broke the large drops of torrential rain into fine water mist. This water mist easily rolled off the sharp needles, causing no harm to the main structure. The weight of the branches ensured the overall stability and solidity of the temporary forest home. Insulating the flat earthen floor played no less important a role than reliable roof insulation. The cold emanating from the damp earth could very quickly chill the body of a sleeping, weary person. The hunter created a thick mattress of spruce branches, laying the branches crisscrossed in several layers. This structure provided a springy effect and raised the bed above the surface of the cold soil. A thick layer of soft, fluffy moss, gathered from dry tree trunks, was spread on top. The doorway was closed off with a special protective shield woven from flexible willow twigs. This shield was fitted tightly into the entrance, completely blocking the cold wind. From the inside, it was further insulated with thick bundles of dry grass and scraps of old fur. The hunter could easily push this shield aside if he needed to improve ventilation or go outside. The fitted door turned the shelter into a completely enclosed and fully self-contained capsule. In severe frosts, the shelter could be further tightly covered with loose snow. Snow is an excellent natural insulator due to the large amount of air between the snowflakes. The snowdrift around the hut created an impenetrable, thick wall against the icy, biting winter wind. The temperature inside such a snow dome could remain above freezing even during severe nighttime cold snaps. But during the rainy autumn season, a thick layer of damp fallen leaves served the same function as snow. Attention to small details when insulating was a vital skill for any traveler. The slightest gap in the structure could lead to the rapid cooling of the entire interior. The hunter carefully inspected his creation from the inside, looking intently for gaps in the roof. Any hole found was immediately plugged with a portion of fresh moss or dry leaves. This painstaking work took up a significant portion of the time spent building a forest shelter. The effectiveness of the plant-based insulation was put to the test during the very first intense hours of severe weather. If it became damp and cold inside, it meant that the construction technique had been seriously compromised. In such cases, the hunter had to make corrections right in the middle of a raging, dark downpour. He would add layers of bark on the outside or pack down the walls from the inside with whatever dry materials were available. Construction errors were punished with a sleepless, cold night and the risk of severe hypothermia. A properly built shelter retained heat perfectly even after the fire had completely died down. The dense materials, warmed up over the course of the evening, slowly gave off their heat to the sleeping, exhausted hunter. The thick walls made of leaves and bark acted like a thermos, effectively insulating the interior microclimate. The air inside remained dry and warm enough until the damp autumn morning arrived. The hunter could rest peacefully, fully regaining his strength before continuing his long journey. What large companies hide has long been known to experienced forest dwellers. The ergonomics of the beaver lodge's interior were calculated by the hunter down to the millimeter. Every item inside the shelter had its own strictly designated place so as not to hinder the hunter's movements. The hearth was located closer to the exit, ensuring good draft and safe removal of acrid smoke. A supply of firewood was neatly stacked along the sidewall so it would always be within reach. Camping gear was hung on protruding knots in the wooden frame that had been left there on purpose. Weapons were placed next to the sleeping platform so they could be grabbed instantly in case of danger. The bag of provisions was securely hung higher up, protecting the food from accidental moisture on the earthen floor. The hunter knew the location of every item by touch, easily finding his way in pitch darkness. The order inside the shelter saved time and prevented the frustrating loss of important gear. The sleeping platform took up most of the usable space in the temporary forest shelter. It was shaped with a slight slope toward the exit so that any water that seeped in would drain downward. The width of the platform allowed a person to turn freely from side to side during deep sleep. The length was calculated so that the feet would not rest against the cold, damp walls of the shelter. A comfortable rest was the key to the quick recovery of a tired hunter's physical strength. The roof of the shelter was within arm's reach of a person sitting on the bed. This made it easy to maintain the multi-layered roof from the inside, plugging gaps without undue physical effort. The small volume of air inside heated up very quickly, even from the tiniest campfire flame. The hunter could control the overall temperature simply by slightly opening or tightly closing the door panel. Regulating the microclimate was completely intuitive, relying solely on his own sensations. The inner surfaces of the bark gradually became covered with a thin, even layer of black soot. The soot acted as an additional sealant, closing the microscopic pores in the dry wood. It also deterred unwanted forest visitors with the sharp smell of burning and lingering smoke. The light from the small fire, reflected off the soot-stained walls, seemed softer and truly cozy. The shelter quickly took on a lived-in look, transforming into a fully fledged, temporary forest home. The silence inside the secure shelter was broken only by the quiet crackling of dry firewood in the hearth. The thick, multi-layered walls of vegetation effectively absorbed the loud external sounds of the raging storm. The hunter could listen to the rustling of the forest in complete peace, without being distracted by the howling wind. Hearing remained the primary tool for monitoring the surroundings in the dangerous night forest. The calm atmosphere fostered deep psychological relaxation after a difficult day. The clever organization of the tiny space allowed him to wait out even several days of severe weather. The hunter could sit, lie down, repair his leather gear, or eat in complete comfort. Supplies of dry firewood and drinking water were calculated to account for possible delays on the journey ahead. The rational use of every square centimeter was the absolute foundation of successful survival. In the next chapter, you'll learn how they maintain the right microclimate. Maintaining a stable internal microclimate required constant attention and very fine tuning. The hunter used the fire not only for heating, but also to control humidity levels. The bright flames quickly dried wet clothing in the inner walls of the plant shelter. As excess moisture evaporated, the fire was reduced to a slow, steady, and safe smolder. Too much heat could dry out the wooden frame and make it a fire hazard. The flow of fresh air was regulated through a movable doorway. The hunter would slightly push aside the woven shield to let in a stream of clean, cold night air. The cold air sank downward, pushing the warm, stale, smoky air out through the upper opening. This constant air exchange prevented the buildup of dampness and unpleasant, stagnant odors. Breathing inside a properly adjusted shelter was always very easy and completely unobstructed. The moisture content of the wood also played an important role in retaining valuable heat inside the shelter. Freshly cut green branches contained sap that evaporated and created an undesirable greenhouse effect. Therefore, the frame was constructed primarily from dry or long-fallen dead trees. The hunter carefully selected building materials, assessing their moisture content by weight and the dull sound they made. Dry wood ensured a dry and comfortable microclimate from the very first moments of construction. Heat loss through the cold earthen floor was minimized by a thick layer of pine needles. The hunter periodically fluffed up his bedding to restore the airy cushion. Compressed, matted branches retained heat less effectively and began to let in dampness and cold from below. Regular maintenance of the sleeping area guaranteed a completely restful sleep without the risk of catching a cold. Taking care of his health was the most important task for a lone traveler far from his tribe. The temperature inside the beaver hut could be 10 degrees higher than outside. This difference was created solely by the heat of the human body in a tiny fire. The hut's perfect spherical shape minimized the surface area that gave off precious heat. Air circulated in a circle, evenly warming every inch of the cramped interior. The physics of the process worked flawlessly for the man, saving him from the icy autumn rain. Warm clothing made from tanned hides was also an important part of the shelter's overall microclimate. The hunter used a large bearskin cloak as a reliable warm blanket. The thick fur excellently retained body heat, creating a personal, self-contained comfort zone. Leather clothing was completely windproof and protected against accidental cold water droplets. The combination of warm clothing and proper shelter provided the best chance for successful survival. The scent of pine needles, smoke, and dry oak leaves created a unique, natural aromatherapy. This natural forest scent perfectly soothed the nervous system after a long, strenuous trek. A person felt completely safe, surrounded by thick walls of vegetation. Psychological comfort was just as important as the physical warmth inside the forest shelter. Confidence in his skills allowed the experienced hunter not to panic in any difficult situation. By early morning, the microclimate inside the shelter had completely stabilized, becoming dry and cool. The fire in the stone hearth had died down completely, leaving behind only gray, cooled down ashes. The hunter woke up truly rested and ready to continue his arduous journey. The shelter brilliantly fulfilled its main purpose, reliably protecting the man from the fierce storm. The experience of many generations had once again proven its incredible reliability and high effectiveness. The sound of the downpour pounding on the shelter's roof created a unique symphony of the wild night forest. Raindrops drummed on the hard outer shell with a rhythmic and completely uninterrupted beat. This monotonous, loud noise drowned out all other sounds, cutting the shelter off from the outside world. The man inside found himself in a kind of dense, acoustic capsule, completely isolated from any disturbances. The sound of the elements was perceived not as a direct threat, but as a kind of lullaby of nature. The hunter had learned to distinguish the intensity of the downpour by the change in the tone of the pounding. The heavy, large drops of a violent storm sounded clear and sharp, striking the top of the dome. A light, drizzling autumn rain produced a very quiet and soft rustling on the dry leaves. This valuable auditory information helped him assess the situation outside without leaving his warm bed. Understanding the language of nature was an absolutely integral part of the traditional forest way of life. The sound of the storm wind tangling in the crowns of the tall trees resembled the distant roar of the ocean. Strong gusts rocked the mighty trunks, causing them to creak and moan longingly under the pressure of the elements. Occasionally, there was a very loud crack as old branches snapped, falling heavily to the ground. The shelter, hidden behind the massive trunk of a fallen giant oak, remained in an acoustic shadow. The wind simply curved around the semicircular dome, creating no strong, irritating howl inside the shelter. Rolls of thunder shook the damp earth, reverberating through the very body of the reclining hunter. Bright flashes of lightning momentarily illuminated the dark forest through the narrow slits in the door panel. After each deafening clap of thunder came a brief pause, filled only by the steady sound of rain. This wild power of nature inspired sincere respect and awe, but not a primal, paralyzing fear. The man knew that his shelter was securely grounded and protected from direct atmospheric strikes. Nocturnal birds and animals were safely sheltered from the downpour, so the forest seemed completely lifeless. There was no muffled hooting of owls, nor the distant howling of lone, hungry wolves. All of nature around him had frozen in anticipation of the storm's end, taking refuge in its deep burrows and nests. The man shared this fate, becoming, for a brief moment, part of the vast forest ecosystem. The complete silence of the living world starkly underscored the power of the raging, inanimate element of water. The experienced hunter's hearing remained incredibly sharp, almost as if in a state of deep, nocturnal slumber. He could wake instantly at any unusual sound that stood out from the general, monotonous background. The crack of a dry branch under a heavy paw, or a suspicious faint rustle at the entrance, triggered an immediate reaction. His hand reflexively rested on the hilt of his trusty tomahawk, fully prepared for immediate defense. Successful survival demanded constant vigilance, even in the most reliable and sturdy shelters. By morning, the loud sound of the rain had gradually subsided, turning into the occasional clear drop. The wind finally died down, leaving behind only a light, pleasant breeze rustling through the treetops. The forest began to come to life very slowly, filling with the timid singing of small birds waking up early. These new sounds heralded the end of a harsh ordeal and the beginning of a new, bright day. The symphony of the night storm gave way to the soothing, quiet melody of a peaceful autumn morning. The hunter lay with his eyes closed, listening intently to the changes in the surrounding soundscape. He savored the moment of the smooth transition from the night's anxiety to the long-awaited morning calm. The sound of raindrops falling from wet oak leaves marked the last few short minutes of rest. It was time to finally set out on the road, leaving his safe, reliable shelter behind. The shelter had fulfilled its main purpose, serving as an excellent acoustic and physical impenetrable shield. The philosophy behind building a forest shelter was based on the deepest respect for the surrounding wilderness. The hunter never tried to conquer the elements or challenge them with brute force. He always strove to blend in as harmoniously as possible with the surrounding landscape, utilizing its unique features. A massive fallen tree was not seen as an annoying obstacle, but became a sturdy foundation for safety. Man adapted to any conditions, much like water taking the shape of any vessel it is poured into. The Beaver Lodge method was the most vivid example of biomimicry in primitive human society. By closely observing these river builders, Native Americans adopted the effective principle of weaving a dome from branches. Beavers created very sturdy huts capable of withstanding the strong pressure of water in the teeth of predators. Humans adapted this technology exclusively for protection against cold rains and squalls. Learning from wise nature was an entirely natural process of acquiring vital, practical knowledge. Their attitude toward the building materials they gathered was also thoroughly imbued with rationality and gratitude. A hunter took exactly as much wood and bark as was truly needed to erect a structure. He never cut down living, healthy trees unless absolutely necessary, preferring to use dry, fallen timber. The use of fallen autumn leaves and moss caused minimal damage to the forest's balanced ecosystem. After the hunter left, the shelter rotted away fairly quickly, returning all nutrients back to the soil. A temporary shelter was by no means a symbol of permanence or ownership of a specific territory. It was merely a brief stopover on a hunter's very long and dangerous journey. A shelter was created solely to address a specific survival need at that particular moment in time. The Indians never became attached to such temporary structures, leaving them far behind with ease. Agility and high mobility were the key to a successful existence in the vast eastern forests. The construction process required complete, maximum concentration and absolute unity of thought and physical action. A person entered a state of deep trance where every movement had been perfected by many generations. The hands quickly found the correct, optimal angle for setting a pole or laying bark. Any doubts and lingering fears receded into the background in the face of a clear physical task. Rapid construction turned into a kind of meditation, perfectly calming the mind before the approaching storm. Strict conservation of one's own energy was one of the most important principles of this forest philosophy. The hunter never took any unnecessary steps when gathering materials for his temporary home. He always chose the optimal, shortest routes and used the most readily available natural resources nearby. Wasting energy on building a large, complex palace would have been an absolutely fatal mistake in conditions of hunger. Simplicity and high efficiency were the most important criteria for evaluating any basic survival skill. Once the bad weather had passed, the wise hunter never destroyed his carefully built, sturdy shelter. He left it completely untouched, knowing that it might come in handy for another traveler caught in a storm. This expression of unspoken, silent solidarity was very characteristic of all the indigenous peoples of the Northeast. Finding a ready-made, dry, sturdy shelter in the forest was considered a great stroke of luck and a true gift from the spirits. The Forest Brotherhood was always built on mutual aid, even among complete strangers. The philosophy of survival always lay in the ability to strike the right balance with the dangerous world around them. Man did not rule over the vast forest, but was its very organic and absolutely integral part. The Beaver Lodge method was just one of many tools in this complex, centuries-old interaction. This unique knowledge allowed the Iroquois to thrive in their vast territories for many centuries. The traditions of their great ancestors protected them far more reliably than any massive stone fortress wall. The morning after a heavy night rain greeted the forest with a very thick and incredibly cool fog. The hunter gently pushed aside the woven door screen and cautiously peered out from his warm, safe shelter. The air was crystal clear, richly filled with the sharp, pleasant scent of damp pine needles and ozone. The very first timid rays of the cold autumn sun began to break through the wet tops of the tall trees. The storm had finally passed, leaving behind only huge puddles and broken heavy branches. The shelter had withstood the test of the elements with flying colors, without a single, even the slightest, structural damage. The thick outer layer of bark had darkened considerably from the moisture, but inside it remained completely dry. The wooden dome of branches had not sagged at all under the considerable weight of the wet oak leaves and pine needles. The hunter surveyed the work of his hands with genuine satisfaction, checking the strength of all the frame joints. The Beaver Lodge construction method had once again proven its unmatched, absolute reliability in harsh conditions. The hunter began quickly gathering his few personal belongings, preparing to continue on his way. He carefully rolled up the large bearskin and stowed it in his waterproof hiking backpack. The weapon was inspected very carefully and wiped dry with a special dry cloth to remove any possible nighttime condensation. Every piece of camping gear had to be in absolutely perfect condition for the hunt ahead. Morning preparations always went very quickly, without any unnecessary fuss or wasting precious daylight hours. A modest breakfast consisted of leftover dry pemmican and clear rainwater collected from the leaves. The food required no heating at all, saving significant time on building a new smoky morning fire. The hunter ate in complete silence, calmly watching the awakening, damp forest through the doorway of the shelter. Birds were already calling loudly to one another in the treetops, genuinely rejoicing in the long-awaited, invigorating, bright sunlight. The forest was rapidly shaking off its nocturnal torpor, fully returning to its usual daytime rhythm. Just before leaving, the hunter very carefully covered up all traces of his stay at this temporary campsite. The fire pit was completely filled with damp earth and very tightly covered with a thick layer of fallen, rotting leaves. It was important not to leave any obvious visual signs of a recent human presence in this specific spot. The shelter remained standing, untouched, blending completely with the surrounding landscape thanks to its perfect natural camouflage. In a few long weeks, it would be completely overgrown with green moss and become utterly invisible to prying eyes. The sun rose higher and higher, gradually dispersing the very thick morning fog over the deep, damp ravines. Moisture evaporated very quickly from the wet leaves, filling the entire forest with a light, beautiful, shimmering mist. The hunter navigated with great confidence by the old, moss-covered tree trunks in the direction of the small streams. He knew exactly how many difficult days of travel remained before reaching the final destination of his long journey. The temporary, forced delay caused by the storm did not disrupt his overall plans for this long autumn in the slightest. The ancient Beaver Lodge lay far behind, a silent, forgotten monument to human ingenuity and endurance. Hundreds of similar dome-shaped structures were regularly built throughout the Northeast during periods of dangerous autumn storms. They reliably saved countless lives of lost hunters, brave scouts, and lone Iroquois warriors. This remarkable, invisible architecture was as much a part of the culture as the grand permanent longhouses. The exceptional simplicity and supreme efficiency of these temporary shelters continue to fascinate many researchers to this day. The long journey continued, and the vast forest graciously opened its arms to welcome the brave and daring man. The formidable elements were ultimately conquered not by the force of weapons, but by a deep understanding of the laws of nature itself. The natural harmony between man and the wild forest once again triumphed triumphantly over the temporary chaos of the raging storm. New dangerous trials inevitably lay ahead, but the experienced hunter was fully prepared for them, 100%. His firm, unshakable confidence was built on the incredibly solid foundation of centuries-old traditions of his great and strong people. What other topics about indigenous peoples' survival in harsh conditions would you like to see in future videos? Suggest your ideas in the comments, and we'll be sure to consider them in detail. Your continued interest helps us create new, exciting historical explorations of past technologies. We're preparing a lot of new content about the daily life of Native American tribes. Be sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss future unique episodes.